100%.
Walk on this cobblestone road. That's what makes
And in front of the Centaur Theatre tonight, the CBC is hosting one of their Massey Lectures here. And I decided that this would be a good opportunity to protest against the fact that CBC journalists, including Carol Off, also Ainsley McLellan, unfortunately, and of course their editors and superiors and so on, effectively aid and abet the Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse cover-up in the aisle by airing highly misleading and even outright false information on CBC Daybreak and CBC As It Happens shows. Both Ainsley McLellan and Carol Off did very softball interviews of Sue Montgomery, and then they essentially allowed Sue Montgomery to spew all kinds of misinformation, even some complete falsehoods, which are really outright lies. The worst falsehoods that Sue Montgomery has been able to spread on the airwaves on CBC radio are two lies, basically the same lie, once on Daybreak, once on As It Happens, in which she stated flatly that there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. Another time she said there's no abuse in the Unitarian Church. So essentially, I can't remember which one's which. I think it was As It Happens, where Sue Montgomery specifically said there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church, and then I think it was on Daybreak, where Sue Montgomery said there's no abuse in the Unitarian Church. This is completely and utterly false. Even if she was only talking about the local Unitarian Church of Montreal, which is absolutely not clear, and I don't believe is the case. She certainly sounded like she was talking in broader terms. She's not in a position to say that there's no abuse whatsoever at the Unitarian Church of Montreal. She's not even in a position to say that there's no sexual abuse whatsoever at the Unitarian Church of Montreal. All she could possibly say is she's not aware of any. But the fact that she flatly stated that there's no abuse in the Unitarian Church, and more specifically that there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church on CBC Daybreak and CBC As It Happens. I will also add that various CBC news reports have been quite biased and slanted. And I tried to get this corrected. I made it very, very clear to As It Happens and Carol Off and CBC Daybreak. I don't think I specifically directly communicated with Ainsley McLellan, but I certainly made it very, very clear to the CBC that there was, these lies and other misinformation had to be responsibly corrected. And that one of the best ways to do that would be to responsibly interview me so that I could provide actual verifiable facts which they could verify, which would prove that Sue Montgomery absolutely was lying when she said there's no sexual abuse or no abuse in the Unitarian Church. But they refused. I filed a complaint with the CBC Ombudsman, and it was brushed off. I wrote back to the CBC Ombudsman, and he just brushed it off again. As far as I'm concerned, he's not acting in an independent manner. He's basically acting in a way that's totally in alignment with essentially what is fake news. I have this other side of the picket sign here. I haven't completed it yet, but I believe that when you report things that are completely and utterly false and highly misleading and biased, that is a form of fake news. And the reason it's blank is because it's not just the CBC. In fact, originally this was set out to say Bell Media, because Bell Media has actually also posted and broadcast complete outright lies in their news reports. That's both CJAD 800 radio and CTV Montreal News in Montreal. Both of these news organizations have basically misled the public with news that is biased, highly misleading, and in some cases outright false. In fact, CTV even went so far as to say that, that no cases of sex crimes have been proven in court in terms of Unitarian Universalist ministers. It's completely and utterly false. A certain number of Unitarian Universalist ministers have been charged, tried, and convicted of sexual abuse and even sexual abuse of children, pedophilia and rape. To use the words of Stikeman Elliott, barristers and solicitors, lawyer Maitre Marc-André Coulombe, such despicable crimes as pedophilia and rape. These have actually been committed by Unitarian Universalist ministers, not to mention Unitarian Universalist Sunday school teachers, who are known as religious educators. And so it's just completely and utterly false, aka fake news, for CBC and CTV and CJD and various other news organizations to report that there's no sexual abuse, no abuse in the Unitarian Church. So I'm here to protest that, to bring this to the attention of the public, and we'll see what happens. The Massey Lectures starts at 7. So I'm expecting people to start showing up around this time, and as we can see, a certain number of people have shown up, not that many, but I expect between now and 6:30 that a good number of people will show up, and hopefully they'll see these picket signs. Okay, sir. So, see if this thing's still recording. So yes, we're still recording. 6 minutes, almost 7 minutes. So we'll keep the monologue going here. So essentially what it comes down to is, CBC Montreal, and indeed CBC nationally, headquartered in Toronto, have refused to tell the truth effectively, and they've refused to correct misinformation and even outright lies that have been spread on their airways, even if their own reporters didn't tell the lies themselves. And I'm not saying they didn't tell some things that are effectively lies, but by allowing Sue Montgomery to brazenly lie and then make no effort whatsoever to correct that, this is, as far as I'm concerned, journalistic malpractice on the part of CBC journalists, and not just CBC journalists, but their news editors and their superiors. Basically, when I complained to the CBC, I initially complained to the shows in question, and somebody's reading the picket signs, so that's an interesting story. Basically, unfortunately, CBC News, as it happens, and Daybreak interviewed Sue Montgomery, who's the mayor of Côte-de-Neige Notre-Dame-de-Grâce. She's also a member of the Unitarian Church of Montreal. She's been helping them hide clergy abuse for quite a long time, and they allowed Sue Montgomery to brazenly lie. Sue Montgomery said there's no sexual abuse in the Unitarian Church. This is completely false. Hundreds of churches have been affected by clergy misconduct. But the point being is, it's one thing to let Sue Montgomery lie, because maybe you're not informed well, maybe you didn't do enough research, but I contacted them. I contacted the Daybreak, and as it happens, personnel, and I said, you need to correct this, and they refused. They totally refused. So essentially, CBC is spreading fake news. That's our national. So anyway, there's a CBC-sponsored event here tonight. A fairly prominent one. It's the Massey Lectures. I don't know if you're aware of that. The Massey Lectures are here, so I figured this would be a good spot to let CBC know I'm not too happy with their journalistic malpractice. Is the word I did. Yeah. You're welcome. Yeah. If you want more information, just Google the appropriate keywords. So that was some people. They read the signs. They thanked me for the information. That's what's supposed to happen in a protest. The whole purpose of a protest is to inform the public that there's a problem. And they were curious. They saw the signs. Oh, and bringing this back to Unitarian Universalism and Unitarian Universalist principles, the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism calls upon people to engage in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. So the key word in there, I think, is responsible. Free is also important. It's important to be unrestricted in your search for truth and meaning, but you got to be responsible too. And I can assure people that unfortunately CBC journalists like Karoloff, like Ainsley McLellan, and like other CBC journalists that have spread misinformation and even outright false information on CBC airwaves, they're not Unitarian Universalists, but they're not living up to that ideal of Unitarian Universalism, and neither is Sue Montgomery and a whole lot of other Unitarian Universalists who brazenly lie about Unitarian Universalist clergy abuse, the cover-up and denial of clergy abuse, and so on and so forth. And when you spread misinformation and lies, you're absolutely not engaged in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. On the contrary, you're trying to hide the truth. You're trying to basically fool people into believing falsehoods and lies. It's completely antithetical to the fourth principle of Unitarian Universalism, when a Unitarian Universalist misleads the public with misleading half-truths and outright lies. So you've got some people coming this way. Well, people are starting to see the signs here. And quite a number of people starting to show up. So anyhow, we shall continue to display these signs.
We're taking my mother's place because my mother couldn't walk.
So I'm just going to make sure this camera is still running. And it is 12 minutes. So I think for the time being, we're just going to stay here and do a little monologue for the camera. And people can see the signs. Good day, sir.
Good day. Could you just stay on the sidewalk, please?
Like here?
Thank you.
Okay, no worries. So I was on the first step just to get a little height. I was asked by a custodian, or someone with the Centaur Theatre anyway, asked me to stand on the sidewalk, so I'm not on their property, as it were, which is fine. I'm just a little bit lower in the frame, but hopefully everything can be seen here. So yes, people are definitely seeing the signs, and some of them have definitely read them and shown some interest. So good afternoon, good evening, guten Abend. Back to my German. This is not too bad. We got various people seeing the signs. If they want more information, they can ask me questions, or they can run Google searches. If they run a Google search now on Karoloff and Unitarian, I think they'll find my blog post that talk about how Karoloff basically was fed a line of bullshit, if I can be mildly rude here. Good day, sir. Just doing a little protest in terms of CBC spreading false information. So I figured there might be some CBC people here tonight.
There might be. Can I take a picture just?
Absolutely, yeah. This is a public protest. You can put on your Facebook.
Oh, you broadcast? No.
I'm recording video because I'm explaining what the protest is about. You can only do so much with a couple of picket signs. I might even continue doing my little monologue here if you don't mind.
Right.
So, anyhow, getting back to things, we're outside the Centaur Theatre. It is one of the Massey Lectures tonight, and I decided that this would be a good opportunity to make it clear to CBC journalists and maybe some CBC executives who might show up that it's really not right for the CBC to spread misinformation and lies, specifically misinformation and lies about Unitarian Universalist clergy views and the cover-up and denial of Unitarian Universalist clergy views. I can speak firsthand in terms of the actual lies that have been spread by CBC on CBC Daybreak and CBC As It Happens in interviews done by Ainsley McLellan, I should say, Ainsley McLellan and Carol Off. And what's unfortunate is, it's one thing for Ainsley McLellan and Carol Off to basically be fed misinformation and bullshit and lies by Sue Montgomery during pretty softball interviews. Maybe they haven't done enough research to know that they're being lied to. So that's one thing. It's one thing, for Sue Montgomery to lie and for this to be spread on CBC airwaves to the public nationally in the case of As It Happens. So for that to happen, I could live with that happening as a result of some incompetence, not enough research. But when I then contact Daybreak and As It Happens and say, hey, there's a problem, you're spreading misinformation and lies that were fed to you by Sue Montgomery, and you need to correct this. You need to tell, what the actual factual, truthful, verifiable information is, which is that literally hundreds of Unitarian Universalist congregations have been affected by clergy sexual misconduct of one kind or another, most of it affecting women. That you can't just let Sue Montgomery lie, and even yourself, in terms of what you say, going along with the narrative she fed you, and not correct it. It's one thing to be fooled into spreading misinformation,